I turned my key in the lock of my apartment door, exhausted but excited to surprise my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, a day early from my business trip to Denver. The marketing conference had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I could hardly wait to see her bright smile and hear about her week. Instead, I stepped into my living room to find 2 uniformed police officers towering over my little girl, who was sobbing uncontrollably while clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppers. Her face was streaked with tears, her small body trembling as she looked up at these intimidating strangers with pure terror in her brown eyes. Standing nearby with their arms crossed and stern expressions were my mother, Patricia, and my sister, Stephanie, looking like they belonged there. Emma spotted me through her tears and ran straight into my arms, whimpering about the scary men who had come to take her away from me. The moment Emma buried her face against my shoulder, I felt my world tilt sideways. Officer Martinez, a stocky man in his 40s with kind eyes that seemed uncomfortable with the situation, stepped forward and introduced himself along with his partner. Officer Johnson, a younger woman with short blonde hair and a professional demeanor. They explained they were responding to a Child Protective Services referral regarding a welfare check on my daughter. "Ma'am, we received a complaint 3 days ago alleging that your child is frequently left alone or with unreliable caregivers while you travel for extended periods," Officer Martinez said, consulting his notepad. "The report claims neglect, inadequate supervision, and concerns about the child's emotional well-being." My blood turned ice cold as the implications hit me. Someone had called CPS on me. Someone had accused me of being an unfit mother. I looked between the officers and my family members, searching for answers in their faces. Who filed this report? I asked, though deep down I already suspected the answer. Patricia stepped forward, her silver hair pulled back in its usual tight bun, wearing the same disapproving expression she had perfected during my childhood. At 58, my mother still carried herself like the elementary school principal she had been for 30 years before retirement, commanding authority and judgment in equal measure. "We did what we had to do to protect Emma," she said firmly, her voice carrying that tone of moral superiority I remembered so well. "You leave this precious child with strangers while you gallivant around the country for your job. A 6-year-old needs stability, not a mother who puts her career before her responsibilities." Stephanie nodded in agreement, her nurse's uniform still crisp despite it being late afternoon. At 29, my younger sister had always been Patricia's favorite, the one who followed all the rules and never caused any trouble. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her green eyes held a mixture of defiance and what looked almost like guilt. "Emma told us last week that she didn't know when you were coming home," Stephanie added. "She said the babysitter was mean to her and wouldn't let her call you. A responsible mother would have emergency contacts and backup plans." I felt Emma's grip tighten around my neck as she listened to these accusations being thrown at me like daggers. The officers observed everything, taking notes and asking follow-up questions about my travel schedule, my childcare arrangements, and Emma's daily routine. "Mrs. Collins," Officer Johnson said, using my married name that I had kept after David's death 3 years ago, "we need to document the current living conditions and speak with your daughter privately to ensure her safety and well-being." "Of course," I managed to say, though my voice was shaking, "but I want to understand exactly what allegations have been made against me." Officer Martinez read from his notes, and with each item my heart sank further. According to the report, I regularly left Emma for 4 to 5 days at a time with minimal supervision. The babysitter was allegedly unreliable and had been seen leaving Emma alone in the apartment. Emma was supposedly often hungry, poorly dressed, and emotionally distressed when I returned from trips. The complaint painted a picture of a neglectful single mother who prioritized her career over her child's basic needs. Every single allegation was false, but as I looked at Patricia's determined face and Stephanie's supporting nod, I realized this was not a misunderstanding or a moment of concern. This was a calculated attack on my parenting, orchestrated by my own family members. "The people who filed this report," I said slowly, "they're my mother and sister." They've been helping me care for Emma since my husband died. I trusted them. The mood in the room shifted as the officers realized they were dealing with a family dispute rather than a straightforward neglect case. Officer Johnson's expression softened slightly as she looked between us. "Ma'am, regardless of who filed the report, we're required to complete our investigation," she explained. "We need to speak with your daughter and examine the living conditions. We also need contact information for your regular babysitter and any other caregivers." Patricia crossed her arms tighter across her chest, her mouth set in a thin line of disapproval. "Officers, I've been a professional educator for over 3 decades. I know what neglect looks like, and I know when a child is suffering from inconsistent parenting. Emma needs a stable home environment, not a mother who treats parenting like a part-time job." The unfairness of her words hit me like a physical blow. Since David's sudden death from a heart attack at 34, I had been doing everything in my power to provide for Emma while maintaining the career that supported us. My job as a marketing consultant required some travel, but I was careful to arrange quality childcare and maintain communication with Emma throughout every trip. "My daughter is not suffering," I said, finding my voice again. "She's loved, cared for, and provided for. I work hard to give her a good life, and I resent any implication otherwise." Stephanie stepped closer to Patricia, presenting a united front. "Janie, you can't see what we see. Emma is anxious all the time. She cries when you leave and acts out when you're gone. She needs consistency, not a mother who's constantly traveling." "That's enough," I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "Officers, I'll cooperate fully with your investigation because I have nothing to hide, but I want it on record that these allegations are coming from family members who apparently have their own agenda." As Emma continued to cling to me, I realized that this moment was a turning point. Whatever Patricia and Stephanie thought they were accomplishing with their accusations, they had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The trust between us was shattered, and I was going to have to fight for my daughter and my reputation as a mother. Officer Johnson knelt down to Emma's level, her voice gentle and reassuring. "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Officer Johnson. I know this is scary, but we just want to make sure you're okay. Can you show me your room?" Emma looked up at me with wide, questioning eyes, and I nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, baby. Show Officer Johnson your beautiful room with all your art projects." As they walked down the hallway, Officer Martinez continued documenting the apartment's condition, while I provided him with contact information for Madison Thompson Emma's primary babysitter and Dr. Rebecca Chen Emma's pediatrician. Patricia and Stephanie remained in the living room, their presence like a dark cloud hanging over everything. 20 minutes later, Detective Sarah Williams arrived. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She introduced herself as the lead investigator for family services cases and explained that she would be conducting a more thorough evaluation. "Mrs. Collins, I understand this is a difficult situation," Detective Williams said as she settled into a chair across from me. "I'd like to start by getting your perspective on the allegations, and then I'll need to speak with your babysitter and any other relevant parties." I explained my work schedule, emphasizing that my trips were typically 2 to 3 days maximum, never the 4 to 5 days mentioned in the report. I detailed my careful vetting process for babysitters and my protocol for maintaining contact with Emma during travel. Detective Williams took notes and asked pointed questions about my income, Emma's school attendance, and our daily routines. "The reporting parties mentioned concerns about your daughter's emotional state and the reliability of your child care arrangements," she said. "Can you elaborate on those aspects?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. Madison's name appeared on the screen, and Detective Williams nodded for me to answer. "Janie, I'm so sorry." Madison's voice was shaky and distressed. "I need to tell you something important about what happened this week." "Madison, I'm here with Detective Williams from the police department. Can you come over right away? We need to discuss the situation with Emma." 30 minutes later, Madison arrived looking pale and nervous. At 19, she was a college sophomore studying early childhood education, and she had been babysitting Emma for over a year. She was always punctual, responsible, and genuinely caring toward Emma. Her hands were trembling as she sat down across from Detective Williams. "I need to tell you the truth about what happened." Madison began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Patricia approached me last Tuesday when I was leaving the apartment. She said she was worried about Emma and asked me questions about how you parent when you're traveling." Detective Williams leaned forward, her attention fully focused on Madison's words. "She asked if Emma ever seemed hungry or sad, if I ever had to stay longer than planned, if you ever came home late from trips. At first I answered honestly that Emma is always well cared for and happy. But then..." Madison's voice trailed off and she looked down at her hands. "Take your time," Detective Williams encouraged gently. "Mrs. Patricia offered me $500 to say that you were neglectful. She said it would help Emma have a better living situation with more family support. She convinced me that it would actually be good for Emma in the long run." The room fell silent except for the sound of my sharp intake of breath. Patricia's face had gone completely white, while Stephanie's mouth hung open in shock. "She gave me specific things to say." Madison continued, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "That you never leave emergency contacts, that you don't provide enough food, that you sometimes come home days late without calling. She said I should tell authorities that Emma cries constantly when you're gone, and that I've had to stay overnight multiple times because you didn't return when expected." Detective Williams was writing rapidly, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "Madison, are any of those statements true?" she asked. "No, absolutely not," Madison said firmly, looking directly at me with apologetic eyes. "Mrs. Collins is an excellent mother. She always leaves detailed instructions, emergency contacts, and extra money for anything Emma might need. She calls multiple times each day to check on Emma and always returns exactly when she says she will. Emma misses her mom when she travels, but she's never neglected or uncared for." "Why did you initially agree to make false statements?" Detective Williams asked. Madison's face crumpled with shame. "I'm struggling to pay for college, and $500 seemed like a solution to my problems. Mrs. Patricia was so convincing about it being for Emma's benefit. But when I saw Emma's face, tonight saw how terrified she was of the police officers, I realized how wrong I was. I can't lie about Mrs. Collins being a bad mother when she's actually wonderful." Patricia finally found her voice, though it was strained and defensive. "I never asked anyone to lie. I simply wanted the truth about Emma's situation to be known. Ma'am, offering money in exchange for false statements to authorities is a serious matter." Detective Williams said, her tone professional but stern. "I'll need to document this conversation as part of my investigation." The detective turned back to Madison with a more understanding expression. "I appreciate your honesty in correcting this misinformation. However, you understand that making false reports to Child Protective Services is also a legal matter that will need to be addressed." Madison nodded through her tears. "I understand. I just want to do the right thing now. Emma doesn't deserve to be hurt because of my mistake." As Detective Williams continued taking detailed statements from Madison, I felt a mixture of relief and growing anger. Relief that the truth was coming out, but anger that my own mother had orchestrated such an elaborate deception. The violation of trust felt deeper than anything I had experienced, even including the grief of losing David. Looking at Patricia's stern face and Stephanie's uncomfortable shifting, I realized that this was just the beginning. If they were willing to bribe someone to make false accusations against me, there had to be more to their motivations than simple concern for Emma's welfare. Something else was driving their actions, and I was determined to find out what it was. While Detective Williams continued interviewing Madison in the kitchen, Officer Johnson emerged from Emma's room with a gentle smile. She reported that Emma's living space was clean, organized, and filled with educational toys, art supplies, and books appropriate for her age. Emma had shown her drawings from school pictures of our recent trip to the zoo and a calendar where she marked off the days until my return from each business trip. "Your daughter seems well-adjusted and clearly loves you very much," Officer Johnson told me quietly. She spoke about your bedtime routine, how you help with homework, and the special activities you do together on weekends. Nothing in her behavior or environment suggests neglect. As the officer spoke, Patricia kept fidgeting with her purse, clutching it tightly against her chest. Something about her nervous behavior caught my attention. When Detective Williams stepped away to make a phone call, Patricia set her purse down on the coffee table to help Stephanie gather her things. That's when I noticed papers sticking out of the partially unzipped side pocket. "Mom, you dropped something," I said, reaching over to help her collect what appeared to be legal documents that had spilled partially out. Patricia moved quickly to snatch the papers away, but not before I caught a glimpse of official letterhead that made my stomach drop. The top document clearly read, Hughes and Associates Family Law, with a subtitle about Grandparents' Rights Consultation. "What are those papers, Patricia?" I asked, using her first name instead of Mom for the first time in years. "Nothing that concerns you," she replied sharply, shoving the documents back into her purse with shaking hands. But Stephanie's face had gone pale, and she was staring at Patricia with an expression that looked like panic. "Mom, you said you threw those away," she whispered urgently. "Stephanie, be quiet," Patricia hissed, but the damage was already done. "What legal consultation?" I pressed, stepping closer to them. "What grandparents' rights are you talking about?" Detective Williams had finished her phone call and was walking back toward us, her sharp eyes immediately picking up on the tension in the room. "Is there something else I should be aware of regarding this family situation?" she asked, looking between the three of us. Patricia's facade of righteous concern was beginning to crack. Her face was flushed, and she kept glancing toward the door as if considering escape. "Patricia, I think you need to explain what those legal documents are about," I said firmly, "especially since you've just been exposed for bribing someone to make false reports about my parenting." Stephanie looked like she was about to be sick. She kept opening her mouth as if to speak, then closing it again, her internal struggle written clearly across her face. "Mrs. Patricia," Detective Williams said, "if there are legal proceedings or consultations related to this child, I need to be made aware of them as part of my investigation." "There's nothing," Patricia insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. That's when I remembered something else that had been bothering me. 3 weeks ago, Patricia had asked detailed questions about David's life insurance policy and Emma's trust fund. At the time, I thought she was just making conversation about Emma's future security. Now those questions took on a much more sinister meaning. Detective Williams: "I think you should know that my daughter has a substantial trust fund from her deceased father's life insurance policy," I said slowly, watching Patricia's face carefully. "The money is held in trust until Emma turns 18, but it can be accessed for educational and medical expenses with proper documentation." Patricia's face went completely white, and Stephanie actually took a step backward. "How substantial are we talking about?" Detective Williams asked clearly, understanding that financial motivations often drove family disputes involving children. $200,000. I replied, never taking my eyes off Patricia's horrified expression. The detective's demeanor shifted noticeably. Family custody disputes involving significant money changed the entire dynamic of child welfare investigations. "Mrs. Patricia, Mrs. Stephanie," Detective Williams said formally, "I'm going to need you to remain available for further questioning. This investigation is expanding beyond the original welfare check." Stephanie finally broke down. "Patricia, tell her the truth." She pleaded, tears starting to flow. "Tell her about the mortgage and the credit cards and everything else." "Stephanie, stop talking," Patricia commanded, but her authority was crumbling. "What mortgage? What credit cards?" I demanded. "Mom's house is in foreclosure," Stephanie whispered, ignoring Patricia's glare. "She's 3 months behind on payments and owes over $15,000 in credit card debt. She thought if she had custody of Emma, she could access the trust fund for Emma's living expenses and use some of it to get caught up on her bills." The room fell silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. My own mother had orchestrated false abuse allegations against me to gain custody of my daughter so she could steal from Emma's trust fund to save her own financial situation. "And what about you, Stephanie?" Detective Williams asked quietly. "What's your role in this plan?" Stephanie was sobbing now, her carefully controlled nurse persona completely shattered. "I have gambling debts, online poker, sports, betting. I owe money to people who are starting to threaten me. Patricia said if we could prove Janie was unfit, we could share custody and access Emma's trust fund to solve both our problems." Patricia finally spoke, her voice cold and defiant. "Emma deserves a stable home environment with people who put her first, not a career-obsessed mother who treats parenting like an inconvenience. The money would have been used for Emma's benefit." "By paying off your mortgage and Stephanie's gambling debts?" I asked incredulously. Detective Williams was writing rapidly, documenting every admission. The nature of this case had completely changed from a child welfare check to a potential conspiracy involving fraud and false reporting. Looking at these two women who I had trusted with my daughter's care, who I had relied on for support after David's death, I felt a betrayal so deep it was physical. They hadn't been concerned about Emma's welfare. They had been planning to steal her future to solve their own financial problems, and they were willing to destroy my reputation as a mother to accomplish their goals. "Officers," I said, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil inside me. "I want to understand what legal options I have here. These aren't just false accusations anymore. This appears to be a conspiracy to commit fraud involving my minor child's protected assets." Detective Williams nodded grimly. "Mrs. Collins, I recommend you contact an attorney immediately. This situation has moved far beyond a family dispute." As Detective Williams continued documenting Patricia and Stephanie's admissions, my neighbor, Mrs. Rachel Burton from apartment 4B, knocked on my door. She was a retired librarian in her 70s, with silver hair and kind brown eyes, who had always been friendly toward Emma and me. She was carrying a manila envelope and looked visibly upset. "Janie, I'm so sorry to bother you during this difficult time," she said, glancing nervously at the police officers and my family members. "But I have something important I need to show you." Detective Williams invited Mrs. Burton to join our conversation, sensing that her information might be relevant to the investigation. "I have a security camera system that covers the front entrance and parking area of our building." Mrs. Burton began, her voice shaking slightly. "For the past 2 weeks, I've been noticing unusual activity that I initially thought might be related to planning a surprise party for Emma." She opened the envelope and pulled out several printed photographs that made my blood run cold. The first image showed Patricia and Stephanie sitting in Patricia's blue sedan in our parking lot at 7:30 in the morning, clearly watching the building entrance. The timestamp indicated this was from 10 days ago. "I noticed them several mornings in a row," Mrs. Burton continued. "They would arrive early and sit in the car for an hour or more, taking notes and photographs." The next photograph showed Stephanie using a telephoto lens to take pictures of Emma playing on the playground outside our building complex. Madison was visible in the background, pushing Emma on the swings. "This concerned me because of how secretive they were being," Mrs. Burton explained. "When I approached them one morning to say hello, they quickly drove away without acknowledging me." Detective Williams examined each photograph carefully, noting the dates and timestamps that clearly established a pattern of surveillance. "There's more," Mrs. Burton said apologetically. "Yesterday afternoon, I saw them meeting with a man in a dark sedan in the parking lot. He handed them an envelope, and they appeared to be discussing some kind of documentation." The final photograph showed Patricia and Stephanie standing beside a black car, speaking with a man in a suit who was handing Patricia what appeared to be official documents. "Did you recognize this man?" Detective Williams asked. "No, but I wrote down his license plate number," Mrs. Burton replied, producing a small notepad. I was starting to worry that something inappropriate was happening, especially when the police cars arrived tonight. Patricia's face had gone ashen as she stared at the photographs that documented her surveillance activities. Stephanie was openly weeping, covering her face with her hands. "Mrs. Burton." Detective Williams said, "Would you be willing to provide copies of these photographs and any security footage you have for our investigation?" "Of course," she replied immediately. I also recorded some of their conversations with other parents at the playground. They were asking leading questions about Emma's behavior and Janie's parenting schedule. "What kind of questions?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand the full scope of their planning. They asked Mrs. Peterson from 3A if she ever heard Emma crying when you were away. They questioned Mr. Garcia about whether he'd seen Emma playing outside unsupervised. They spoke with the mail carrier about whether Emma ever seemed hungry or poorly dressed. Each revelation felt like another betrayal. Patricia and Stephanie hadn't just filed false reports, they had spent weeks systematically gathering what they hoped would be supporting evidence for their accusations. They were building a case against me. I said, the full realization hitting me. This wasn't a spontaneous concern about Emma's welfare. This was a calculated campaign to paint me as an unfit mother. Detective Williams was photographing Mrs. Burton's evidence with her phone while making detailed notes about the timeline of surveillance activities. The man in the black sedan, she said, based on the license plate information, I can trace that vehicle and identify who they were meeting with. Stephanie finally looked up from her hands, her face streaked with tears and mascara. It was Robert Hughes, the lawyer Patricia consulted about grandparents' rights. He was giving us documentation about how to file for emergency custody based on neglect allegations. "Stephanie, stop talking," Patricia snapped, but her commanding tone had lost all its power. "No, I can't do this anymore," Stephanie replied, her voice gaining strength. "We planned this whole thing, Patricia. We researched Janie's travel schedule. We figured out when she'd be away. We coached Madison on what to say, and we timed the police report for maximum impact." Detective Williams set down her pen and looked directly at both women. "Ladies, I need to inform you that conspiracy to file false reports with Child Protective Services is a felony charge. Combined with the surveillance activities and plans to fraudulently access a minor's trust fund, you're looking at serious criminal charges." Mrs. Burton gasped, apparently not realizing how serious the situation had become. "Oh my goodness, Janie, I'm so sorry this happened to you and Emma." "Thank you for coming forward," I told her sincerely. "Your evidence might be what saves Emma and me from this nightmare." As Mrs. Burton left to retrieve additional security footage from her apartment, I looked at Patricia and Stephanie with a mixture of rage and profound sadness. These were the women who had held Emma as a baby, who had attended her birthday parties, who had comforted me after David's death. Now they sat before me exposed as conspirators who had been willing to traumatize my child and destroy my reputation for their own financial gain. "I trusted you," I said quietly, my voice carrying the weight of deep betrayal. "After David died, you were the family I relied on to help me raise Emma. You held her when she was sick. You celebrated her accomplishments. You told me I was doing a good job as a single mother." Patricia's mask of righteous indignation finally slipped completely. For the first time, she looked genuinely ashamed. "The house was everything to me," she whispered. 40 years of marriage, 30 years of teaching, and I was going to lose it all because of medical bills and credit card debt. I thought if Emma lived with me, the money would just help provide for her anyway. "But you were willing to destroy my relationship with my daughter to get that money," I replied. "You were willing to have Emma taken away from the only parent she has left." Detective Williams closed her notepad and stood up. "Mrs. Collins, I'm going to recommend that this case be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. I'm also going to ensure that Child Protective Services receives a complete report documenting the false nature of the original allegations." As the officers prepared to leave, Emma emerged from her bedroom, where she had been playing quietly during most of the adult conversations. She ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist, looking up at Patricia and Stephanie with confused eyes. "Grandma, why are the police here?" she asked innocently. "Did something bad happen?" Patricia's composure finally cracked completely as she looked at her granddaughter's trusting face. The reality of what she had done, the trauma she had caused to this innocent child, seemed to hit her all at once. "Yes, sweetheart," she said through tears. "Something very bad happened, and it was Grandma's fault." The next morning, Detective Williams arrived with Dr. Amanda Foster, a child psychologist specializing in family trauma cases. Dr. Foster was a warm woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a soothing voice that immediately put Emma at ease. She explained that she needed to spend some time with Emma to make sure she was feeling okay after the scary experience with the police officers. Sometimes when grown-ups have big problems, it can make children feel confused or worried. Dr. Foster explained to Emma as they settled into the living room with art supplies and toys. I talk with kids to help them understand their feelings and make sure they're safe and happy. I watched from the kitchen as Emma began drawing pictures while chatting with Dr. Foster. At first, their conversation seemed normal. Emma described her favorite activities, her school friends, and her excitement about an upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. But gradually, Dr. Foster's questions became more focused on Emma's emotions and her understanding of family relationships. "Emma, when Mommy goes on work trips, how do you feel?" Dr. Foster asked gently. "Sometimes sad because I miss her," Emma replied carefully, coloring a picture of our apartment building. "But Madison stays with me and we make cookies and read stories. Mommy always calls me before bedtime." "That sounds nice. Do any grown-ups ever tell you things that make you worried or scared?" Emma's crayon stopped moving across the paper. She looked up at Dr. Foster with an expression that seemed far too serious for a 6-year-old. "Grandma Patricia says Mommy doesn't really want to take care of me." Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "She says working mommies get tired of their children and sometimes give them away to people who can love them better." My heart shattered into pieces as I heard my daughter's words. I gripped the kitchen counter so tightly my knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to rush into the living room and gather Emma into my arms. Dr. Foster maintained her calm professional demeanor while making notes. "That must be very scary to hear. What else does Grandma Patricia tell you about Mommy's work?" "She says if I'm too much trouble, Mommy might not come back from her trips." Emma continued, now abandoning her drawing entirely. "She says I should be extra good and not ask for too many things, because working mommies don't like children who need too much." The psychological manipulation was even worse than I had imagined. Patricia hadn't just been planning to steal from Emma's trust fund. She'd been systematically undermining Emma's sense of security and my bond with my daughter. "Emma, has anyone ever told you that you might have to live somewhere else?" Dr. Foster asked carefully. Emma nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Grandma Patricia said I might be happier living with her and Aunt Stephanie because they don't have to go to work all the time. She said maybe Mommy would visit me sometimes, like on weekends." Dr. Foster handed Emma some tissues and spoke in an even gentler tone. "Sweetheart, I want you to know that what Grandma Patricia told you isn't true. Mommies who work love their children just as much as mommies who don't work. Your mommy loves you very, very much, and she will always take care of you." "But what if I'm too much trouble?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "You are not too much trouble," Dr. Foster said firmly. "You are exactly the right amount of wonderful for your mommy. Sometimes grown-ups say things that aren't true when they're having their own problems." As their session continued, more disturbing details emerged. Patricia had been telling Emma that children who lived with their grandparents got more presents and better food. She suggested that mommies who traveled for work didn't really love their children as much as grandmothers did. Most devastatingly, she had convinced Emma that asking me about these conversations would make me angry and might cause me to leave permanently. "I've been trying to be extra good so Mommy won't go away forever," Emma confessed to Dr. Foster. "I don't tell her when I'm sad or scared because Grandma says working mommies don't like sad children." The psychological damage was extensive and calculated. Patricia had exploited Emma's natural 6-year-old anxieties about separation and amplified them into genuine terror about abandonment. She had weaponized Emma's love for me against both of us. Dr. Foster spent another hour helping Emma understand that her feelings were normal and that none of the scary things Patricia had told her were true. She used play therapy techniques to help Emma express her fears and begin processing the confusing messages she had received from her grandmother. Emma has been experiencing significant emotional distress, Dr. Foster explained to me privately after their session ended. The symptoms she's displaying, regression in potty training, nightmares, anxiety about your return from trips, are consistent with psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. My mother had been emotionally abusing my daughter while I trusted her to provide loving care. She's been having nightmares about you not coming home, Dr. Foster continued. She's developed attachment anxiety that's directly related to the false narratives she's been told about working mothers. The good news is that children are resilient, and with proper therapy and reassurance, she can recover from this manipulation. How could my own mother do this to Emma? I asked, struggling to understand the depth of Patricia's betrayal. Financial desperation can drive people to justify almost anything, Dr. Foster replied sadly. In Patricia's mind, she probably convinced herself that taking custody of Emma would actually benefit everyone. But the psychological manipulation required to achieve that goal constitutes emotional abuse regardless of her intentions. Detective Williams documented every aspect of Dr. Foster's evaluation, including Emma's specific statements about Patricia's manipulation tactics. This evidence would be crucial for the criminal investigation and for ensuring that Patricia and Stephanie couldn't claim they were acting in Emma's best interests. Dr. Foster, in your professional opinion, would continued contact between Emma and Patricia be harmful to the child's psychological well-being? Detective Williams asked. Absolutely, Dr. Foster replied without hesitation. Emma needs time to recover from this manipulation without further exposure to the person who caused the trauma. Any future contact should be carefully supervised and contingent on Patricia receiving counseling for her manipulative behavior. As Dr. Foster packed up her materials, Emma approached me with one of her drawings. It showed our apartment with two stick figures labeled Mommy and Emma, standing together surrounded by hearts. Above them, she had written in her careful 6-year-old handwriting, "Mommy loves me even when she works." Dr. Foster helped me remember that you always come back, Emma said, hugging my legs tightly, and that working doesn't mean you don't love me. I knelt down to Emma's level and held her face gently in my hands. Sweet girl, I love you more than anything in the entire world. Working helps me take care of us, but you are always the most important thing in my life. I will never, ever give you away or stop loving you. Even if I'm scared sometimes or need too many things, she asked, echoing Patricia's poisonous words. Especially when you're scared or need things, I assured her. That's what mommies are for, to help their children feel safe and loved no matter what. As I held my daughter close, feeling her small body relax against mine as the fear left her, I realized that Patricia's betrayal went far deeper than financial fraud or false reporting. She had attacked the most fundamental bond in Emma's life, the trust between a mother and child. The healing from this trauma would take time, but I was determined to undo every bit of psychological damage Patricia had inflicted on my precious daughter. 2 days later, I sat across from attorney Jennifer Walsh in her downtown law office, surrounded by boxes of evidence that Detective Williams had helped me compile. Jennifer was a family law specialist in her early 40s, with steel gray eyes and a reputation for aggressive representation in complex custody and fraud cases. Janie, what your mother and sister did goes far beyond a simple family dispute, Jennifer said as she reviewed the police reports, Dr. Foster's psychological evaluation, and Mrs. Burton's surveillance photographs. We're dealing with multiple felony charges here. She spread out a legal pad and began listing the potential charges. Filing false reports with Child Protective Services is a Class D felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. The conspiracy between Patricia and Stephanie elevates this to organized criminal activity. The bribery of Madison Thompson constitutes witness tampering. The planned fraud involving Emma's trust fund is financial exploitation of a minor. Can they actually go to prison for this? I asked, still struggling to believe the severity of the situation. Absolutely, Jennifer replied firmly. District Attorney Karen Rodriguez has built her reputation on protecting children and prosecuting fraud cases. When I spoke with her office yesterday, they expressed strong interest in pursuing criminal charges. Jennifer pulled out another folder labeled Civil Remedies. Beyond the criminal prosecution, we have excellent grounds for civil lawsuits. She continued. We can sue for emotional distress to both you and Emma, defamation of your character as a mother, attempted fraud, and punitive damages. The surveillance activities and psychological manipulation of Emma could result in substantial monetary damages. I don't care about the money, I said honestly. I want Emma protected, and I want to make sure they can never do this to us again. The money matters because it ensures accountability, Jennifer explained. Financial consequences often speak louder than criminal sentences when it comes to deterring future behavior. Plus, Emma will need therapy to recover from the psychological manipulation, and those costs should be covered by the people who caused the trauma. Jennifer opened Emma's trust fund file, which I had brought from my safety deposit box. The account statements showed the full $200,000 balance from David's life insurance policy, carefully managed and growing through conservative investments. This trust fund was clearly their primary motivation, she observed. They researched the terms and figured out how custody arrangements might give them access to the funds for Emma's living expenses. Is the money safe now? I asked, worried that they might have already found ways to access it. We're going to add additional security measures immediately, Jennifer assured me. New authorization requirements, different bank notifications, and legal restrictions that prevent anyone except you from making withdrawal requests. We'll also have the account audited to ensure no unauthorized access has occurred. As Jennifer continued outlining our legal strategy, I felt a sense of empowerment that had been missing since this nightmare began. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Patricia and Stephanie's attacks. I was taking control of the situation and fighting back. There's something else you should know, Jennifer said, her expression becoming even more serious. I did some preliminary research on Patricia's financial situation. Her mortgage foreclosure is more advanced than Stephanie indicated. The house is scheduled for auction in 6 weeks unless she pays $38,000 in back payments and fees. She was that desperate, I said, understanding now why Patricia had been willing to risk everything. Desperate people make dangerous choices, Jennifer replied. But desperation doesn't excuse criminal behavior, especially when it involves harming children. Jennifer's phone rang and she answered with a professional greeting. After a brief conversation, she hung up with a satisfied smile. That was Detective Williams. The license plate from Mrs. Burton's photographs traced back to attorney Robert Hughes. He's agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for immunity from conspiracy charges. What does that mean? It means he's going to provide documentation of every conversation he had with Patricia and Stephanie, including their specific plans to access Emma's trust fund through custody arrangements. He's also turning over copies of the legal documents he prepared for them. This development felt like a turning point. With Hughes cooperating and providing documentation of their premeditated planning, Patricia and Stephanie's claims about acting in Emma's best interests would be completely undermined. Jennifer, I need to ask you something important, I said. If they're convicted of these charges, can they still have any legal rights regarding Emma? Could they try to claim visitation or grandparents' rights in the future? Jennifer's expression grew firm and protective. Given the criminal charges, the false reporting, and Dr. Foster's findings about psychological manipulation, we can petition for permanent restrictions on their contact with Emma. No judge is going to award visitation rights to people who emotionally abused a child as part of a financial fraud scheme. What about other family members, Patricia's sister Helen, my cousins? We can distinguish between family members who participated in this conspiracy and those who didn't, Jennifer explained. Your goal should be protecting Emma while maintaining healthy family relationships where possible. As our meeting concluded, Jennifer handed me a thick folder containing legal documents and a detailed timeline of next steps. Janie, "I want you to understand something important," she said as we shook hands. "What happened to you and Emma was not just a family dispute. It was a calculated attack on your parental rights and your daughter's psychological well-being. You have every right to pursue full legal consequences, and I believe we have an excellent chance of success." Walking out of Jennifer's office, I felt a sense of clarity and determination that had been missing since this ordeal began. Patricia and Stephanie had underestimated my resolve to protect Emma and my willingness to fight for our family. They were about to discover that their carefully planned scheme had serious legal consequences that would extend far beyond anything they had anticipated. The little girl they had tried to manipulate and exploit was going to be protected, and the trust fund they had tried to steal would remain secure for Emma's future. Most importantly, they would never again have the opportunity to harm my daughter or undermine our relationship. Jennifer Walsh suggested arranging a meeting with Patricia and Stephanie before criminal charges were filed, giving them one opportunity to understand the full legal consequences of their actions. She believed that confronting them with our evidence might result in confessions that would strengthen our case and potentially lead to plea agreements that ensured Emma's protection without the trauma of a lengthy trial. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at Patricia's house, the same house she was desperately trying to save from foreclosure through her scheme to access Emma's trust fund. I arrived with Jennifer and a court reporter who would document everything said during our conversation. Patricia answered the door looking older and more haggard than I had ever seen her. Her usually perfect silver hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. Stephanie was already inside, pacing nervously around the living room where I had spent countless childhood hours. "Janie, please tell me we can work this out as a family," Patricia said as we entered. "Surely we don't need lawyers and police reports over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated incredulously. "Mom, you orchestrated false child abuse allegations against me, bribed my babysitter to lie to authorities, conducted surveillance on my apartment, and planned to steal from Emma's trust fund. That's not a misunderstanding. That's criminal conspiracy." Jennifer set her briefcase on Patricia's dining room table and pulled out copies of all the evidence we had compiled. Police reports, Dr. Foster's psychological evaluation, Mrs. Burton's surveillance photographs, Madison's confession, and Attorney Hughes's documentation were arranged in neat stacks. "Mrs. Patricia," Mrs. Stephanie Jennifer began formally, "my client has asked me to present you with the evidence we've gathered regarding your activities over the past month. She's hoping you'll understand the severity of the legal situation you're facing." Stephanie sat down heavily on the couch, her face already showing resignation, but Patricia remained standing, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "I did what I thought was best for Emma," Patricia insisted. "Janie works too much and that child needs stability." "Let's review what you actually did," Jennifer said, opening the first folder. "You researched grandparents' rights laws and consulted with attorney Robert Hughes about gaining custody of Emma. You surveilled Janie's apartment building for 2 weeks, photographing Emma and documenting daily routines. You bribed Madison Thompson to provide false testimony about neglect. You filed false reports with Child Protective Services. And you planned to use custody of Emma to access her trust fund for your own financial benefit. As Jennifer methodically presented each piece of evidence, Patricia's defensive posture began to crumble. The surveillance photographs were particularly damaging. They clearly showed premeditated planning rather than spontaneous concern for Emma's welfare. The psychological evaluation of Emma reveals the true cost of your actions. Jennifer continued, her voice growing colder. Dr. Foster documented significant emotional trauma directly resulting from your manipulation tactics. You told a 6-year-old child that her mother didn't love her and might abandon her. You exploited her natural separation anxiety to serve your own purposes. Stephanie finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "We never meant to hurt Emma. We thought she would be better off with more family support." "While you paid off gambling debts with her trust fund money," I asked sharply. "That was going to be temporary." Stephanie protested weakly. We would have paid it back before she needed it for college. Jennifer opened another folder and pulled out financial documents that made both women's faces go pale. We've conducted a preliminary audit of Emma's trust fund, she announced. Patricia, did you think we wouldn't discover the $12,000 you've already stolen? The room fell silent except for the sound of Stephanie's sharp intake of breath. You've already been stealing from Emma. I said, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a plan. You were already doing it. Patricia's facade finally collapsed completely. She sank into her recliner, looking defeated and ashamed. The bank required documentation for educational expenses, she admitted quietly. I forged your signature on withdrawal requests. I told them the money was for private tutoring and educational materials. $12,000 worth, Jennifer asked incredulously. I was behind on the mortgage payments, Patricia whispered. I thought I could replace the money before anyone noticed. Stephanie was openly crying now, rocking back and forth on the couch. Oh God, Patricia, you said we were just going to ask for custody. You didn't tell me you were already stealing from her trust fund. How long has this been going on? I demanded. 6 months, Patricia admitted. Small amounts at first just to cover urgent bills. But then the mortgage company started foreclosure proceedings and I needed more. Jennifer was writing rapidly, documenting every admission. These confessions would be crucial for both the criminal prosecution and our civil lawsuit. Ladies, I need you to understand something very clearly. Jennifer said, her voice carrying the weight of legal authority. Patricia, you've admitted to forgery, theft from a minor's trust fund, filing false reports with Child Protective Services, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Stephanie, you've admitted to conspiracy, filing false reports, and planning to use a minor's trust fund for personal debts. What does that mean? Stephanie asked fearfully. It means you're both looking at felony charges that could result in significant prison time, Jennifer replied bluntly. Patricia could face up to 10 years for the multiple theft and fraud charges. Stephanie could face 5 to 7 years for conspiracy and false reporting. Patricia's face went completely white. Prison. But I'm 58 years old. I'm not a criminal. You committed crimes against a 6-year-old child, I said firmly. You stole money that belonged to Emma's future. You tried to destroy my reputation as a mother. You psychologically manipulated my daughter. Those are the actions of a criminal. Stephanie looked up at me with desperate eyes. Janie, please, we're family. Isn't there some way to work this out without involving the police? You involved the police when you filed false reports against me, I replied. You made this a legal matter when you decided to commit crimes to solve your financial problems. Jennifer pulled out one final document, a proposed plea agreement that she had prepared in consultation with the district attorney's office. There is one possible alternative to a full criminal trial, she said. The DA's office is willing to consider reduced charges in exchange for full restitution, community service, mandatory counseling, and permanent restrictions on contact with Emma. What kind of restrictions? Patricia asked quietly. No unsupervised contact with Emma until she turns 18 and can decide for herself. All future contact, if any, must be supervised by a neutral third party. Complete restitution of stolen trust fund money, plus damages for Emma's therapy and our legal costs. And you would both plead guilty to reduced charges that would result in probation rather than prison time. Patricia and Stephanie looked at each other, the weight of their choices finally becoming clear. If you reject this offer, Jennifer continued, we will pursue full criminal prosecution and civil damages. Based on the evidence we have, convictions are highly likely, and the sentences would be substantial. As I watched these two women who had been such important parts of my life grapple with the consequences of their choices, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination. They had made their decisions when they chose to attack my family for their own financial gain. Now they would have to live with the results of those choices. But Emma and I would be protected, and that was all that truly mattered. Word about our situation began spreading through our community when Michael Torres, an investigative reporter for Channel 7 News, learned about the case through court filings that had become public record. He contacted Jennifer Walsh's office requesting an interview about what he called a disturbing case of family financial exploitation disguised as child welfare concerns. Initially, I was reluctant to speak publicly about such a personal family matter, but Jennifer convinced me that media attention could serve an important purpose. Cases like yours happen more often than people realize, she explained during a phone call. Grandparents using false accusations to gain custody for financial reasons, family members exploiting children's trust funds, psychological manipulation disguised as concern. Your story could help other families recognize these warning signs. 3 days after our confrontation with Patricia and Stephanie, I found myself sitting across from Michael Torres in Channel 7's downtown studio. He was a seasoned journalist in his 50s, with graying hair and compassionate eyes that immediately put me at ease. "Janie, thank you for agreeing to share your story," Michael began as the cameras rolled. "Can you tell our viewers what happened when you returned home from your business trip?" I described finding Emma terrified and crying in front of police officers, learning about the false accusations, and gradually discovering the elaborate conspiracy Patricia and Stephanie had orchestrated. Michael asked thoughtful questions that allowed me to explain the psychological manipulation Emma had endured and the financial motivations behind the false reports. "What was most shocking to you about your family's actions?" Michael asked. "The betrayal of trust," I replied honestly. "These were the people I relied on to help me raise Emma after my husband died. I trusted them with my daughter's care, and they used that trust to manipulate her and plan to steal from her future." The interview aired that evening during the 6 o'clock news, generating immediate and overwhelming community response. By the next morning, Jennifer's office was flooded with calls from viewers, expressing support and sharing similar experiences with family financial manipulation. Emma's school principal, Mrs. Sandra Martinez, called to assure me that the entire school community stood behind us. She had worked in education for 20 years and had seen several cases where family members exploited children's inheritances or trust funds during custody disputes. "Janie, Emma is clearly a well-loved, well-cared-for child," Mrs. Martinez told me. "Anyone who knows your family can see that the accusations were false. We're prepared to provide character witnesses if needed for any legal proceedings." The local parenting community rally around us was extraordinary. Sarah Chen, president of our Neighborhood Mothers Group, organized a letter-writing campaign to the district attorney's office supporting prosecution of Patricia and Stephanie. Over 50 parents signed statements attesting to my character as a mother and Emma's obvious well-being. "We see you with Emma at school events, at the playground, at community activities," Sarah told me. "You're an involved, loving mother who happens to work hard to provide for your daughter. What your family did was an attack on all working parents." Madison Thompson, feeling terrible about her initial involvement, gave a televised interview apologizing publicly and explaining how Patricia had manipulated her into making false statements. "Mrs. Patricia made me believe I was helping Emma," Madison said, tears streaming down her face. "She convinced me that Mrs. Collins was neglecting Emma because she worked too much, but I was there. I saw how much Emma loves her mother and how well cared for she is. Mrs. Collins is an excellent mother, and I'm ashamed that I let anyone convince me otherwise." Madison's interview generated additional sympathy for our situation, while highlighting how manipulative Patricia had been in orchestrating her scheme. Meanwhile, Patricia and Stephanie were experiencing very different community reactions. Stephanie's supervisor at Memorial Hospital called her in for a disciplinary meeting after administrators learned about her involvement in filing false child abuse reports. Healthcare workers are mandated reporters. The hospital's ethics board explained to Stephanie, "Filing knowingly false reports undermines the entire child protection system and violates our professional ethics standards." Stephanie was placed on administrative leave pending the resolution of criminal charges, effectively ending her nursing career at that facility. Patricia faced social ostracism in her retirement community as neighbors learned about her actions through news coverage and community gossip. The same people who had respected her during her teaching career now crossed the street to avoid speaking with her. Mrs. Eleanor Davidson, Patricia's next-door neighbor for 15 years, summed up the community's sentiment. "We're shocked and disappointed. Patricia always seemed like such a devoted grandmother. To learn that she was manipulating that precious little girl and trying to steal from her trust fund, it's just heartbreaking." The media attention also caught the attention of child welfare advocates across the state. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, director of the Children's Defense Fund of our state, reached out to discuss using our case to promote stronger penalties for false reporting to Child Protective Services. "Your situation highlights serious flaws in our system," Dr. Martinez explained during a phone call. "Currently, the consequences for filing false reports are minimal compared to the trauma they cause families. We'd like to work with you to advocate for legislative changes." Jennifer Walsh was pleased with the media coverage and community support, explaining that public awareness often influenced prosecutorial decisions. When the community clearly supports prosecution and understands the seriousness of the crimes, it gives the DA's office confidence to pursue appropriate charges, she told me. The fact that other families are coming forward with similar experiences shows that this isn't an isolated incident. As I read letters of support from parents throughout our community and watched news coverage that clearly portrayed Patricia and Stephanie's actions as criminal rather than misguided family concern, I felt validated in my decision to pursue legal consequences. Emma thankfully was largely shielded from the media attention. Her friends' parents were supportive and understanding, ensuring that she felt loved and protected at school and in our neighborhood. "Mommy, Mrs. Chen told me that lots of people are happy we're safe now," Emma said one evening as I tucked her into bed. "She said what Grandma Patricia did was wrong and that everyone knows you're a good mommy." The community support reinforced what I had known all along, that my parenting was appropriate and loving, and that Patricia and Stephanie's accusations were false and motivated by greed rather than genuine concern for Emma's welfare. 2 weeks after the criminal charges were filed, CPS Supervisor Linda Matthews requested a meeting to present the findings of their comprehensive investigation into the allegations against me. I arrived at the Child Protective Services office with Jennifer Walsh nervous about the outcome despite knowing the accusations were false. Linda Matthews was a veteran social worker in her early 50s with kind brown eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately conveyed competence and fairness. She had supervised hundreds of child welfare cases during her 20-year career and had a reputation for thorough, objective investigations. "Mrs. Collins," she began as we settled into her office, "I want to start by apologizing for the trauma this investigation has caused you and Emma. While we're required to investigate all reports of potential neglect, it's clear that this case involved malicious false reporting rather than legitimate child welfare concerns." She opened a thick folder containing the complete CPS investigation file. "We conducted extensive interviews with Emma's pediatrician, her school teachers, her babysitters, and multiple community members," Linda continued. "We also reviewed financial records, travel documentation, and your employment history. Every single piece of evidence supports the conclusion that you are an excellent mother, providing appropriate care for your daughter." The relief I felt was overwhelming. Despite knowing the accusations were false, the CPS investigation had been hanging over me like a sword threatening everything I held dear. Dr. Rebecca Chen, Emma's pediatrician, provided glowing reports about Emma's health development and emotional well-being, Linda explained. Her medical records show consistent preventive care, appropriate treatment for minor childhood illnesses, and no indications of neglect or abuse. Emma's teachers at Riverside Elementary were equally positive, she continued. Mrs. Johnson described Emma as a happy, well-adjusted child who speaks lovingly about her mother and demonstrates secure attachment. Emma's academic performance and social development are both excellent. Jennifer took notes as Linda presented each aspect of their investigation, building a comprehensive picture of appropriate parenting that completely contradicted Patricia and Stephanie's allegations. Your work travel schedule, which was central to the original complaint, falls well within normal parameters for single working parents, Linda stated firmly. 2 to 3 days per month with carefully arranged childcare and multiple daily contact with Emma is entirely appropriate and responsible. Madison Thompson provided detailed statements about your parenting practices, Linda continued. She described thorough preparation for each trip, clear emergency protocols, adequate financial provision for Emma's needs, and consistent communication. Her initial false statements were clearly the result of financial coercion by Patricia. Linda pulled out Dr. Foster's psychological evaluation, which had become a crucial part of the CPS review. Dr. Foster's assessment reveals that Emma's only psychological distress stems from manipulation by Patricia, not from your parenting or travel schedule, Linda explained. When not subjected to Patricia's undermining messages, Emma demonstrates secure attachment, appropriate emotional regulation, and healthy development. What does this mean for our family going forward? I asked. The CPS case against you is officially closed with a finding of unfounded allegations, Linda announced. This means our investigation found no credible evidence supporting any of the reported concerns. Your case file will reflect that the allegations were false and motivated by factors unrelated to child welfare. Jennifer smiled with satisfaction. An unfounded determination was the strongest possible vindication from CPS, clearly establishing that the original accusations had no merit. Additionally, Linda continued, we're referring Patricia and Stephanie's case to our fraud investigation unit for systematic abuse of the child protection system. Their actions represent exactly the kind of manipulation our agency works to prevent. Will there be consequences for them through CPS? Jennifer asked. Yes, Linda replied firmly. They'll be flagged in our system as individuals who have filed knowingly false reports. Any future allegations they make against any family will be subject to enhanced scrutiny. We're also recommending that no unsupervised contact with Emma be permitted until she reaches majority age. Linda opened another folder containing additional documentation from their investigation. We interviewed several other families in your community as part of our comprehensive review, she said. Every parent we spoke with described you as caring, involved, and responsible. Emma is clearly thriving under your care. Mrs. Burton's security footage was particularly valuable, Linda added. It clearly established that Patricia and Stephanie conducted surveillance and planned their false report rather than responding to immediate safety concerns. Jennifer asked about the implications for Emma's ongoing therapy with Dr. Foster. We strongly support continued counseling to help Emma process the psychological manipulation she experienced, Linda replied. Dr. Foster's therapy plan focuses on rebuilding Emma's sense of security and undoing the damage caused by Patricia's undermining messages. The good news is that children are resilient, Linda continued. With appropriate therapy and continued loving care from you, Emma should recover fully from this trauma. As our meeting concluded, Linda handed me an official letter documenting CPS's findings and recommendations. Mrs. Collins, in my 20 years with Child Protective Services, I've seen many cases where family members exploit our system for personal gain, she said. Your situation is particularly egregious because it involved extended psychological manipulation of a young child. I want you to know that our agency fully supports the criminal prosecution of Patricia and Stephanie. We also want to use your case as a training example for our investigators, she added. It demonstrates the importance of looking beyond initial allegations to identify underlying motivations, especially when substantial financial assets are involved. Walking out of the CPS office with complete vindication felt like emerging from a nightmare into daylight. The agency charged with protecting children had thoroughly investigated our situation and determined that Emma was safe, loved, and well cared for in my home. More importantly, CPS had recognized Patricia and Stephanie's actions for what they truly were: criminal abuse of the child protection system designed to serve their own financial interests rather than Emma's welfare. Emma's future was secure, our family was protected, and the truth about Patricia and Stephanie's conspiracy had been officially documented by every relevant authority. Justice was finally within reach. 3 weeks after the CPS vindication, Jennifer Walsh called with news that would deepen the criminal charges against Patricia and Stephanie. The district attorney's office had assigned forensic accountant Thomas Bradley to conduct a comprehensive audit of Emma's trust fund, and his findings were more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. "Janie, you need to come to my office immediately," Jennifer said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Mr. Bradley has uncovered evidence of systematic theft from Emma's trust fund that goes far beyond the $12,000 Patricia admitted to taking." I arrived at Jennifer's office within an hour, my stomach churning with anxiety about what new betrayals might be revealed. Thomas Bradley was a meticulous man in his 60s, with silver hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to see through every financial detail. His reputation for uncovering complex fraud schemes had made him the go-to expert for white-collar crime investigations. "Mrs. Collins." Thomas began as he spread financial documents across the conference table. "I've completed a forensic analysis of all activity in Emma's trust fund account over the past 18 months. What I discovered constitutes systematic embezzlement using sophisticated identity theft and forgery techniques." The documents he showed me made my blood run cold. Bank statements revealed a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals totaling not $12,000 but $37,000 over the course of 14 months. "Patricia gained access to your personal banking information and social security number through documents you likely shared with her for emergency purposes," Thomas explained. "She used this information to establish herself as an authorized representative on Emma's trust fund account." "How is that possible?" I asked, struggling to understand how my own mother could have perpetrated such an elaborate fraud. "She provided the bank with forged documentation claiming you had granted her power of attorney for educational and medical decisions regarding Emma," Thomas replied. "The signatures on these documents are sophisticated forgeries that would have fooled casual inspection." Jennifer examined the forged power of attorney documents with growing outrage. "These aren't amateur forgeries. Someone with significant skill created these documents." "That's correct," Thomas confirmed. "My analysis suggests professional assistance in creating the false documentation. The quality of the forgery work indicates someone with experience in document fraud." "Are you saying Patricia had help with this?" I asked. "Almost certainly," Thomas replied. "I've identified payments from Patricia's personal account to a company called Document Solutions LLC, a front operation that we've connected to several other identity theft cases. She paid them $2,500 for services rendered just 3 weeks before the first unauthorized withdrawal from Emma's trust fund." The scope of Patricia's planning was staggering. This wasn't desperation driving hasty decisions. It was calculated, premeditated fraud involving professional criminals. The withdrawal pattern shows careful planning to avoid detection," Thomas continued. "Small amounts initially claimed as legitimate educational expenses, then gradually larger sums, as Patricia became more confident in her ability to avoid discovery." He pulled out a timeline showing each fraudulent transaction. Emma's kindergarten year had seen claims for advanced tutoring and educational assessment testing that never occurred. During Emma's first grade year, Patricia had stolen money claiming expenses for private music lessons and specialized learning materials. "Every single educational expense claim was fabricated," Thomas stated. "I contacted each vendor supposedly providing services to Emma. None of them have any record of her enrollment or participation." "Where did the stolen money go?" Jennifer asked. Thomas opened another folder containing Patricia's personal financial records, which the court had subpoenaed as part of the criminal investigation. The money was used primarily to make mortgage payments and cover credit card debt. he replied. However, approximately $8,000 went to cash advances that Patricia then used to fund her meetings with the document forging operation and attorney Robert Hughes. She used Emma's college money to pay for help stealing more of Emma's college money. I said the circular betrayal making me feel physically sick. Essentially, yes, Thomas confirmed. But there's more. Patricia also attempted to change the beneficiary designation on the trust fund to name herself as Emma's guardian with full financial authority. Jennifer's face went pale. If that had succeeded, she would have gained legal access to the entire $200,000 trust fund. Thomas finished. The bank rejected the beneficiary change because it required multiple forms of authentication that Patricia couldn't provide, but the attempt is documented in their records. The implications were staggering. Patricia hadn't just been stealing money to solve immediate financial problems, she'd been working toward gaining complete control of Emma's entire inheritance. There's one more concerning discovery. Thomas said, his expression growing even more serious. Patricia made inquiries about life insurance policies in Emma's name. Life insurance on a 6-year-old? I asked incredulously. She contacted 3 different insurance companies asking about policies for Emma, with herself named as beneficiary. Thomas confirmed. She claimed it was for estate planning purposes, but given the pattern of financial exploitation, it raises serious questions about her intentions. Jennifer was writing furiously, documenting each new revelation. Thomas, in your professional opinion, what was Patricia's ultimate goal? Complete financial control over Emma through custody arrangements that would have given her legal authority over all of Emma's assets. Thomas replied. The false CPS reports were just the first step in a comprehensive plan to separate Emma from her mother and gain access to significant financial resources. How much money are we talking about in total? I asked. The trust fund theft plus interest and penalties totals $42,000, Thomas calculated, but the attempted fraud involving the full trust fund represents a crime valued at over $200,000. Combined with the life insurance inquiries and document forgery, we're looking at federal wire fraud charges in addition to state charges. Jennifer explained that federal involvement would significantly increase the potential penalties for Patricia and Stephanie. Wire fraud involving amounts over $100,000 can result in 20 years in federal prison, she said. The sophisticated nature of the document forgery elevates this to organized criminal activity. What about recovering the stolen money? I asked. Patricia's house is worth approximately $180,000 with a mortgage balance of $140,000, Thomas replied. Even after foreclosure proceedings, there should be sufficient equity to cover full restitution plus damages. We're also pursuing seizure of all her other assets, Jennifer added. Bank accounts, retirement funds, personal property. She won't be able to hide behind bankruptcy protection for criminal restitution. As Thomas packed up his documents, the full scope of Patricia's betrayal became clear. She hadn't just filed false accusations or stolen some money. She had orchestrated a sophisticated long-term criminal enterprise designed to separate me from Emma and steal my daughter's entire future. Mrs. Collins, Thomas said as he prepared to leave, I want you to know that in 30 years of forensic accounting, I've rarely seen fraud this calculated and cruel. Using a child's trust fund to finance the very conspiracy aimed at exploiting that child represents a level of manipulation that demands the strongest possible legal consequences. Looking at the evidence of Patricia's systematic theft and elaborate planning, I realized that the mother who had raised me, who had seemed to love Emma, had been transformed by financial desperation into someone I didn't recognize. The woman who had sung lullabies to my daughter had spent over a year stealing from Emma's future while planning to take her away from me entirely. But now we had the evidence to ensure that Patricia's scheme would result in complete justice for Emma and protection for our family. District Attorney Karen Rodriguez scheduled a press conference for Friday morning to announce the criminal charges against Patricia and Stephanie. As I sat in the front row of the courthouse media room surrounded by reporters and cameras, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness watching my family's private trauma become a matter of public justice. De Rodriguez was a formidable woman in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and intense brown eyes that conveyed both competence and compassion. She had built her career prosecuting financial crimes and child exploitation cases, earning a reputation for aggressive prosecution of those who harmed children for personal gain. "Ladies and gentlemen," DA Rodriguez began as the cameras rolled, "today I'm announcing felony charges against Patricia Collins, age 58, and Stephanie Collins, age 29, in connection with a sophisticated conspiracy to defraud a minors' trust fund through false child abuse allegations." She outlined the charges methodically, and the severity was breathtaking. Patricia faced 7 felony counts, 2 counts of filing false reports with Child Protective Services, 3 counts of theft from a trust fund, 1 count of forgery, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Each charge carried potential sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years, with the possibility of consecutive rather than concurrent sentencing. The evidence shows that Patricia Collins systematically stole $37,000 from her 6-year-old granddaughter's college trust fund over a period of 14 months. DA Rodriguez continued, "She used professional document forgers to create false power of attorney paperwork and made multiple false claims about educational expenses that never occurred." Stephanie's charges were equally serious: conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports with Child Protective Services, and accessory to theft. Her potential sentence ranged from 3 to 7 years in state prison. Stephanie Collins participated in surveillance activities, helped orchestrate the false abuse allegations, and planned to use the stolen trust fund money to pay off personal gambling debts, DA Rodriguez explained. The most shocking announcement came when DA Rodriguez revealed that federal prosecutors were also filing charges. The sophisticated nature of the document forgery and the interstate banking transactions involved in this fraud have prompted federal authorities to file wire fraud charges as well, she announced. Patricia Collins faces an additional federal charge that carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Reporter Michael Torres from Channel 7 raised his hand. "DA Rodriguez, how often do you see cases where family members exploit children's trust funds through false abuse allegations?" "This case represents an unfortunately growing trend," DA Rodriguez replied. "We're seeing increased incidents of family members using false accusations to gain custody and access to children's financial assets. The psychological manipulation involved makes these crimes particularly heinous." Another reporter asked about the impact on Emma. "What measures are being taken to protect the child victim in this case?" "The court has issued protective orders preventing any contact between the defendants and the minor victim," DA Rodriguez explained. "We're also working with Child Protective Services to ensure ongoing therapeutic support for the child who suffered significant psychological manipulation as part of this conspiracy." Jennifer Walsh, sitting beside me, was contacted by several reporters after the press conference. She provided additional context about the civil lawsuit we were pursuing alongside the criminal prosecution. "Our client is seeking full restitution of the stolen funds, plus punitive damages for the emotional trauma inflicted on both mother and child," Jennifer told Channel 7's cameras. "The defendants attempted to destroy a loving family relationship for their own financial gain, and there must be accountability for that harm." The reaction from our community was swift and supportive. By afternoon, Jennifer's office had received dozens of calls from parents expressing outrage at Patricia and Stephanie's actions and offering to provide character witnesses for any proceedings. Emma's school principal, Mrs. Martinez, issued a statement supporting our family. "Emma Collins is a bright, happy child who clearly benefits from excellent parenting. The charges against her grandmother and aunt represent a betrayal of family trust that has shocked our entire school community." Meanwhile, Patricia and Stephanie were experiencing very different reactions. Patricia's attorney, Robert Chen, held his own brief press conference attempting damage control. "My client is a respected retired educator who acted out of genuine concern for her granddaughter's welfare," Chen claimed. While some of her methods may have been misguided, her motivations were entirely focused on providing better stability for the child. DA Rodriguez quickly responded to these claims during an afternoon news conference. "The evidence clearly contradicts any assertion that these defendants were motivated by concern for the child's welfare," she stated firmly. "Systematic theft of $37,000 from a child's college fund, combined with psychological manipulation designed to undermine the child's relationship with her mother, cannot be characterized as acting in the child's best interests." The federal prosecutor assistant U.S. Attorney David Marshall also addressed Chen's characterizations. "Document forgery involving children's trust funds is not misguided concern. It's sophisticated financial fraud," Marshall declared. "The defendants engaged professional criminals to create false documents, enabling them to steal from a 6-year-old's college education fund. That's federal wire fraud, and we will prosecute it accordingly." As news coverage continued throughout the day, public opinion clearly supported aggressive prosecution. Online comments on news articles overwhelmingly condemned Patricia and Stephanie's actions, with many parents expressing horror at the idea of family members exploiting children's trust funds. Dr. Amanda Foster, Emma's therapist, was interviewed about the psychological impact of family financial exploitation on children. "Children who discover that trusted family members have stolen from them often struggle with feelings of betrayal and insecurity that can last into adulthood," Dr. Foster explained. "The fact that this theft was combined with psychological manipulation makes the emotional damage even more severe." That evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked about all the news cameras and reporters who had been at the courthouse. "Mommy, why are there so many people talking about Grandma Patricia?" Emma asked with innocent curiosity. "Remember how Dr. Foster explained that Grandma Patricia made some very bad choices that hurt our family?" I replied gently. "Well, now, the people whose job it is to make sure bad choices have consequences are doing their work." "Will Grandma Patricia have to say sorry?" Emma asked. "She'll have to face the consequences of her choices," I answered carefully. "But the most important thing is that you're safe now and no one can hurt you or take you away from me." As Emma drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of justice, finally being served. The criminal charges represented not just punishment for Patricia and Stephanie, but protection for Emma and validation that their actions were serious crimes rather than family disputes. The woman who had sung Emma lullabies and the aunt who had played games with her at family gatherings would now face the full weight of the legal system for their betrayal of our family's trust. The criminal trial began on a crisp October morning, 6 months after Patricia and Stephanie's arrest. Judge Margaret Thompson, a veteran jurist with 30 years of experience, presiding over complex fraud cases, had rejected the defense's attempts to characterize the case as a family dispute rather than criminal conspiracy. Jury selection had taken 3 days with both prosecution and defense teams, carefully evaluating potential jurors' attitudes toward family relationships, financial fraud, and child protection issues. The final jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men, including several parents who clearly understood the seriousness of crimes against children. De Rodriguez opened the prosecution case with a powerful statement that laid out the full scope of Patricia and Stephanie's conspiracy. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal of the most fundamental kind," she began. "The defendants exploited their positions as trusted family members to steal from a 6-year-old girl's college fund while systematically undermining her relationship with her loving mother. She used a timeline and financial charts to demonstrate the premeditated nature of the fraud, showing how Patricia had researched trust fund access, hired professional forgers, and executed a sophisticated theft scheme over 14 months. This was not desperation driving poor judgment. DA Rodriguez emphasized. This was calculated criminal behavior designed to separate a child from her mother for financial gain. The prosecution's first witness was Thomas Bradley, the forensic accountant, who methodically explained how Patricia had stolen $37,000 using forged documents and false claims about educational expenses. The defendants created an elaborate fiction about tutoring music lessons and specialized learning materials that never existed, Bradley testified. Every single withdrawal was fraudulent, and the money was used to pay Patricia's mortgage and credit card bills. Patricia's defense attorney, Robert Chen, attempted to minimize the financial crimes during cross-examination. Mr. Bradley, is it possible that Patricia Collins genuinely believed she was helping secure Emma's living situation by preventing foreclosure of the family home? Chen asked. Sir, belief doesn't transform theft into charity, Bradley replied firmly. Ms. Collins used professional document forgers and made false statements to financial institutions. Those are criminal acts, regardless of claimed motivations. The prosecution's second day featured testimony from Dr. Amanda Foster about the psychological damage inflicted on Emma through Patricia's manipulation tactics. Emma was systematically told that her mother didn't love her and might abandon her, Dr. Foster testified. This psychological manipulation created severe attachment anxiety in a 6-year-old child who had previously felt secure in her family relationships. Dr. Foster's testimony was devastating to the defense. She described Emma's regression in potty training, her nightmares about abandonment, and her fear that asking for things would cause me to leave permanently. The defendants exploited this child's natural separation anxiety and amplified it into genuine terror about being abandoned, Dr. Foster explained. This constitutes emotional abuse designed to serve the defendant's custody goals. Stephanie's attorney, Maria Santos, attempted to portray her client as a victim of Patricia's manipulation rather than a willing conspirator. Dr. Foster, isn't it possible that Stephanie Collins was misled about the severity of the situation and genuinely believed she was helping her niece? Santos asked. Ms. Santos, the evidence shows that Stephanie participated in surveillance activities, helped plan false allegations, and discussed using Emma's trust fund money for personal gambling debts. Dr. Foster replied, those actions indicate awareness of the conspiracy rather than innocent concern. The third day brought Madison Thompson's emotional testimony about how Patricia had bribed her to provide false statements to authorities. Mrs. Patricia offered me $500 to say that Mrs. Collins was neglectful. Madison testified through tears. She gave me specific lies to tell about Emma being hungry, dirty, and emotionally distressed. Why did you initially agree to make these false statements? Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh asked. I was struggling financially and $500 seemed like a solution, Madison replied. But Mrs. Patricia was very convincing about it being for Emma's benefit. She made me believe I was helping a child in need. Chen's cross-examination of Madison focused on her financial motivations and initial willingness to lie. Ms. Thompson, you were willing to make false statements about child neglect in exchange for money, correct? Chen asked aggressively. Yes, and I'm deeply ashamed of that decision, Madison replied. But Mrs. Patricia manipulated my financial desperation and convinced me I was doing the right thing. The fourth day featured testimony from Mrs. Rachel Burton about the surveillance activities she had documented with her security cameras. I observed Patricia and Stephanie conducting systematic surveillance of the apartment building for over 2 weeks, Mrs. Burton testified. They were photographing Emma timing daily routines and meeting with unknown individuals who provided them with documentation. The surveillance photographs were particularly damaging evidence clearly establishing premeditation rather than spontaneous concern for Emma's welfare. The prosecution's most powerful moment came when DA Rodriguez played recordings of Patricia and Stephanie's admissions from our family confrontation meeting. The jury listened in apparent shock as Patricia's voice filled the courtroom. I forged your signature on withdrawal requests. I told them the money was for private tutoring and educational materials. Stephanie's admission about gambling debts and plans to access Emma's trust fund was equally damaging. Patricia said if we could prove Janie was unfit, we could share custody and access Emma's trust fund to solve both our problems. Chen objected repeatedly to the recordings, but Judge Thompson ruled them admissible as voluntary statements made with legal counsel present. The defense case lasted only 2 days. Chen called character witnesses who testified about Patricia's 30-year teaching career and her apparent devotion to Emma during family gatherings. Patricia Collins dedicated her life to educating children, testified former colleague Helen Martinez. I cannot believe she would intentionally harm her own granddaughter. However, the prosecution's rebuttal witnesses effectively countered these character references. Helen Collins, Patricia's own sister, provided the most devastating testimony against the defense. Patricia has always been manipulative when it comes to money. Helen testified reluctantly. 20 years ago, she tried to gain control of our father's finances using similar tactics, claiming he was incompetent and needed family management of his assets. Did Patricia succeed in that attempt? D.A. Rodriguez asked. No, because our father recognized what she was doing and cut off contact with her for several years, Helen replied. Patricia has a pattern of financial desperation, leading to inappropriate behavior toward family members. Helen's testimony established that Patricia's current actions were part of a lifelong pattern, rather than an isolated incident driven by temporary financial stress. Santos attempted to present Stephanie as Patricia's victim, but the prosecution's evidence of Stephanie's gambling addiction and active participation in surveillance activities undermined this defense strategy. Stephanie Collins was an adult professional nurse who made conscious decisions to participate in this conspiracy, D.A. Rodriguez argued during closing statements. Her gambling debts provided clear motivation, and her actions demonstrated awareness of the criminal nature of their plan. As closing arguments concluded, the weight of evidence against both defendants was overwhelming. The jury had heard detailed testimony about systematic theft, psychological manipulation of a child professional document, forgery, and elaborate false accusations designed to separate a loving family. Patricia and Stephanie's fate now rested with 12 jurors who had spent a week learning about betrayal, greed, and the devastating impact of family financial exploitation on an innocent child. The jury deliberated for 8 hours over 2 days before reaching their verdict. When court reconvened on Friday morning, the tension in the packed courtroom was palpable. I sat in the front row with Jennifer Walsh, holding my breath as the forewoman stood to deliver the jury's decision. On the charge of filing false reports with Child Protective Services, we find the defendant, Patricia Collins, guilty, the forewoman announced clearly. A wave of relief washed over me as the guilty verdicts continued. Patricia was found guilty on all 7 felony counts, 2 counts of filing false reports, 3 counts of theft from a trust fund, 1 count of forgery, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Stephanie was found guilty on all 3 of her charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports with Child Protective Services, and accessory to theft. Judge Thompson scheduled sentencing for the following month, allowing time for pre-sentence investigations and victim impact statements. The federal wire fraud charges would be addressed in a separate proceeding the following week. The federal trial was swift and decisive. Assistant U.S. Attorney David Marshall presented evidence of the sophisticated document forgery operation and interstate banking fraud that elevated Patricia's crimes to federal jurisdiction. Patricia pled guilty to federal wire fraud charges in exchange for a concurrent sentence recommendation, avoiding a trial that could have resulted in even harsher penalties. Sentencing day arrived on a cold November morning. Judge Thompson's courtroom was again packed with supporters, media representatives, and court officials. Patricia and Stephanie sat at separate defense tables, both looking significantly older and more haggard than they had 6 months earlier. I had prepared a victim impact statement that I delivered directly to the court and the defendants. Your Honor, Patricia and Stephanie's actions didn't just steal money from my daughter's future. They stole her sense of security and trust in family relationships. I began my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. Emma spent months believing that I didn't love her and might abandon her because of lies Patricia told her. She developed anxiety about my work travel and feared that asking for things would make me leave permanently. The psychological damage went far deeper than the financial theft. I looked directly at Patricia as I continued. You held Emma as a baby. You celebrated her birthdays and comforted her when she was sick. You used that trust to manipulate her emotions and plan to steal her future. That betrayal will take years of therapy to fully heal. Dr. Foster also provided a victim impact statement describing Emma's ongoing recovery from the psychological manipulation. Emma continues to require therapy to rebuild her sense of security and trust, Dr. Foster explained. While she's made remarkable progress, the defendant's actions created trauma that will require continued professional support. Jennifer Walsh presented our restitution request full recovery of the stolen $37,000 plus interest payment for Emma's therapy costs, compensation for legal fees, and punitive damages for emotional distress. Patricia's attorney made a final plea for leniency based on her age, her teaching career, and her claimed remorse for her actions. Your Honor, Mrs. Collins is a 58-year-old woman with no prior criminal history who acted out of financial desperation rather than malicious intent, Chen argued. Prison time would be unduly harsh for someone of her age and background. Judge Thompson's response was swift and decisive. Mr. Chen, your client didn't just steal money. She systematically abused a child's trust and manipulated a 6-year-old's emotions to serve her own financial goals. Judge Thompson replied firmly. The sophisticated planning, the professional document forgery, and the psychological manipulation of a minor demonstrate criminal behavior that demands significant consequences. Judge Thompson then delivered sentences that reflected the serious nature of their crimes. Patricia received 8 years in state prison, 2 years each for the false reporting charges, 3 years for the aggravated theft charges, and 1 year for conspiracy, with some sentences running concurrently. The federal wire fraud sentence of 5 years would run concurrently with her state sentence. Mrs. Collins, you exploited your position as a trusted family member to commit sophisticated fraud against your own granddaughter, Judge Thompson stated. Your actions required extensive planning and caused significant psychological harm to a child. The sentence reflects both the seriousness of your crimes and the need to deter similar exploitation of children. Stephanie received 3 years in state prison plus 5 years of supervised probation. Her sentence was reduced due to her cooperation with investigators and her demonstration of genuine remorse. Ms. Collins, while you were influenced by gambling addiction and your sister's planning, you made conscious choices to participate in this conspiracy, Judge Thompson explained. Your nursing profession makes your participation in false child abuse allegations particularly troubling. Both defendants were ordered to pay complete restitution totaling $68,000, including the stolen funds' interest therapy costs, legal fees, and punitive damages for emotional distress. The restitution will be secured by liens against all defendants' assets, including the forced sale of Patricia Collins' residence, Judge Thompson ordered. Emma's trust fund will be fully restored and protected against any future unauthorized access. Judge Thompson also issued permanent protective orders preventing any contact between Patricia, Stephanie, and Emma until Emma reaches age 18 and can decide for herself whether she wants any relationship with them. The court finds that continued contact would not be in the child's best interests given the psychological manipulation and emotional abuse that occurred, Judge Thompson stated. Patricia's final statement to the court was brief and defensive, rather than apologetic. I did what I thought was necessary to provide stability for Emma, she said. I never intended to hurt her. Stephanie's statement showed more genuine remorse. I'm deeply sorry for the pain I caused Emma and Janie, she said through tears. I let gambling addiction and fear drive me to make terrible choices that hurt people I love. As court adjourned and the defendants were led away to begin serving their sentences, I felt a profound sense of justice finally being served. Emma's future was protected, the stolen money would be restored, and the women who had betrayed our trust would face significant consequences for their actions. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer Walsh addressed the media gathered for final comments on the case. Today's sentences send a clear message that exploiting children for financial gain will result in serious consequences, she stated. Emma can now move forward knowing that justice has been served and her future is secure. DA Rodriguez also provided closing comments. This case demonstrates our commitment to protecting children from all forms of exploitation, including financial fraud disguised as family concern. We will continue to aggressively prosecute anyone who harms children for personal gain. As I drove home to Emma, who had been carefully shielded from the courtroom proceedings, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that had been pressing down since that terrible night when I found her crying in front of police officers. Justice had been served, our family was protected, and Emma's future was secure from those who had tried to steal it. 6 months after Patricia and Stephanie were sentenced, Emma and I had settled into a new normal, built on healing therapy and rebuilding trust. Dr. Foster continued working with Emma twice a month, and the progress was remarkable. The anxious, fearful child who had worried about abandonment had transformed back into the confident, happy little girl I remembered from before Patricia's manipulation. "Mommy, I had the best dream last night," Emma told me one morning over breakfast. "I dreamed that I helped other kids who were scared like I was, and I told them that grown-ups who lie get in trouble and kids are safe." Dr. Foster had been amazed by Emma's resilience and her growing desire to help other children who might face similar situations. "Emma has developed remarkable empathy and understanding for such a young child," Dr. Foster explained during one of our sessions. "She wants to use her experience to help others, which indicates healthy processing of her trauma." Emma's recovery milestones came steadily throughout the spring. She stopped having nightmares about me not returning from work trips. Her regression in potty training resolved completely. Most importantly, she began expressing her needs and emotions freely again, instead of trying to be the perfect child Patricia had convinced her she needed to be. "I missed you while you were in Chicago, but I knew you would come back because you always do," Emma told me after a recent business trip. "And Madison and I made cookies, and she read me 3 stories before bedtime." The trust fund had been fully restored with the restitution payments plus additional security measures that prevented any future unauthorized access. Jennifer Walsh had worked with the bank to establish new protocols requiring multiple forms of authentication and court approval for any withdrawals before Emma turned 18. "Emma's educational future is completely secure now," Jennifer assured me during our final legal meeting. "The enhanced security measures mean that no one can access her college money without proper legal authority." My own healing process had involved therapy as well. Working with a counselor who specialized in family betrayal trauma helped me process the deep hurt of Patricia and Stephanie's actions while learning to trust my instincts as a mother again. "You were already an excellent parent before this happened," my therapist reminded me. "Their actions reflected their own problems, not any deficiency in your mothering." The community support had continued long after the trial ended. Emma's school had implemented new protocols for recognizing signs of family manipulation after learning about our case. Other parents shared their own experiences with financial exploitation by family members creating an informal support network for families facing similar challenges. Sarah Chen from our Mothers Group organized a fundraiser for the Children's Defense Fund, raising money for legal assistance for families dealing with false accusations and custody manipulation. "Your courage in pursuing justice has helped other families understand their rights," Sarah told me. "Several parents have contacted lawyers after recognizing similar warning signs in their own situations." Madison Thompson had become one of Emma's most trusted babysitters again after completing community service and counseling, related to her initial involvement in Patricia's scheme. Her genuine remorse and commitment to making amends had impressed both Emma and me. "Mrs. Collins, "I promise I will never let anyone convince me to lie about you or Emma again," Madison had told me earnestly. "I've learned that financial problems are never an excuse for hurting people you care about." Emma's relationship with other family members had been carefully managed to preserve healthy connections while maintaining protection from those who had harmed us. Helen, Patricia's sister, who had testified against her, had become a positive presence in Emma's life, providing the grandmother figure Emma needed while respecting appropriate boundaries. "Aunt Helen tells me stories about when you were little like me," Emma shared one evening. "She says you were always brave and took good care of your toys, just like how you take good care of me now." The most meaningful development came when Emma expressed interest in creating a support group for children who had experienced family manipulation or false accusations. "Dr. Foster, can we help other kids who have scary family problems like I did?" Emma asked during a therapy session. "I want to tell them that it's not their fault when grown-ups make bad choices." Dr. Foster was enthusiastic about Emma's idea and worked with us to develop an age-appropriate peer support program for children affected by family exploitation. "Children often heal best when they can help other children," Dr. Foster explained. Emma's desire to support others shows remarkable emotional growth and resilience. The support group met monthly at the community center with Dr. Foster, facilitating discussions among children ages 5 to 10 who had experienced various forms of family manipulation. Emma quickly became a natural leader, using her experience to help other children understand that they weren't responsible for adult behavior. "When grown-ups do bad things to get money or hurt other grown-ups, it's never the kids' fault," Emma would tell newer group members. "And there are good grown-ups who make sure the bad ones can't hurt kids anymore." My career had also evolved in positive ways. The marketing firm where I worked had been incredibly supportive throughout the legal proceedings, and my experience had led to opportunities to speak at conferences about work-life balance and protecting children from financial exploitation. "Your situation highlights how important it is for working parents to have strong legal protections for their children's assets," I told a conference of single mothers. "Trust funds and inheritance protections need multiple layers of security to prevent family exploitation." As Emma's 7th birthday approached, we planned a celebration that would mark not just another year of her life, but our family's recovery from trauma and emergence into a new chapter of security and hope. "Mommy, can we invite all my new friends from the support group to my party?" Emma asked while we planned the celebration. "I want them to see that families can be happy again after bad things happen." Looking at my daughter's bright smile and confident demeanor, I marveled at her strength and resilience. The little girl who had once feared that asking for things would make me leave was now advocating for other children and planning celebrations with generous enthusiasm. Patricia and Stephanie were serving their sentences in different facilities with no contact allowed with Emma or me. I had received one letter from Stephanie expressing remorse and asking about Emma's well-being, but Jennifer advised against any response that might suggest willingness to resume contact. The healing process would continue for years, but Emma and I had emerged from the crisis stronger, closer, and more aware of our own resilience. We had learned that family relationships must be built on genuine love and respect rather than manipulation or obligation, and we had created new traditions that celebrated our bond while protecting our future. Most importantly, Emma had learned that she was deeply loved, completely safe and worthy of protection from anyone who might try to exploit or harm her. Those lessons would serve her well throughout her life, turning a traumatic experience into a foundation for strength and wisdom. 1 year after the nightmare began, Emma and I stood together in the courthouse where Patricia and Stephanie had been sentenced, but this time for a much happier reason. We were there to witness the signing of new legislation that strengthened penalties for filing false Child Protective Services reports and enhanced protections for children's trust funds. Governor Sarah Martinez had invited us to attend the bill signing as representatives of families who'd been harmed by false accusations and financial exploitation. "Emma, your bravery and healing from what happened to you has helped create laws that will protect other children," Governor Martinez told Emma as cameras captured the moment. Sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the most important changes. Emma, now 7 years old and confident beyond her years, had prepared her own statement for the occasion. "My name is Emma, and I want other kids to know that when grown-ups do bad things to them, there are good grown-ups who will help." She read from a carefully written note card. Kids should never be scared that telling the truth will get them in trouble. The new legislation, dubbed Emma's Law by media, covering the story, required enhanced verification procedures for family-reported child abuse cases and established felony penalties for anyone who filed false reports for financial gain. It also mandated additional security measures for children's trust funds and inheritance accounts. Dr. Foster had documented Emma's remarkable recovery in a case study that was being used to train other child psychologists in recognizing and treating family manipulation trauma. Emma demonstrates that children can not only recover from psychological manipulation, but can develop enhanced empathy and resilience as a result. Dr. Foster explained in her presentation to the State Psychology Association. Her desire to help other children shows how trauma survivors can transform their experiences into advocacy and healing for others. The monthly support group Emma had helped establish had grown to include 15 children and had become a model program being replicated in other communities. Emma's natural leadership abilities and genuine compassion made her an inspiration to younger children facing their own family crises. "Emma helps me remember that my daddy's mean words about mommy weren't true," 6-year-old Tyler shared during one group session. She says kids can see when grown-ups are lying to get what they want. The financial restitution from Patricia and Stephanie had been completed through the forced sale of Patricia's house and seizure of their other assets. Emma's trust fund was now worth more than its original amount due to the additional damages awarded and continued investment growth. More importantly, the enhanced security measures meant that Emma's college education was permanently protected from any future exploitation. Jennifer Walsh had used our case as the foundation for establishing a legal clinic specializing in family financial exploitation cases. The clinic provided pro bono legal services for families dealing with false accusations motivated by greed or custody manipulation. Janie and Emma's situation opened our eyes to how common these cases actually are. Jennifer explained during a legal conference. "We're seeing an average of 3 new cases per month involving family members exploiting children's assets through false abuse allegations." Madison Thompson had completed her community service and counseling requirements, graduating with honors from her early childhood education program. She planned to work in child advocacy, using her experience to help identify and prevent family manipulation of children. "What I did to Emma's family taught me how easy it is to be manipulated when you're desperate," Madison reflected. "Now I want to help other young people recognize and resist pressure to harm children, even when they're told it's for a good cause." Patricia and Stephanie were halfway through their prison sentences, with no possibility of parole due to the nature of their crimes. Patricia's letters to family members showed little genuine remorse, continuing to justify her actions as necessary for Emma's welfare. Stephanie's letters demonstrated more authentic regret and responsibility for her choices. Helen, Patricia's sister, had maintained a healthy relationship with Emma and me while completely cutting contact with Patricia. "Patricia made her choices and now she has to live with the consequences," Helen said firmly. "Emma deserves family members who love her without trying to exploit her." Emma's academic performance had not only returned to its previous excellent level, but had exceeded it. Her teachers noted enhanced maturity, empathy for classmates facing difficulties, and leadership skills that were remarkable for a 7-year-old. Emma has an unusual ability to recognize when someone is upset and offer appropriate comfort, her 2nd-grade teacher reported. She seems to understand emotions and relationships at a much deeper level than her peers. My career had also evolved significantly. The marketing firm had promoted me to Director of Family Services Accounts, recognizing my unique perspective on work-life balance and family protection issues. I had begun speaking nationally about protecting children from family financial exploitation and supporting working single parents. My experience taught me that being a working mother doesn't make you vulnerable to legitimate criticism. I told a conference of professional women, but it can make you a target for family members who want to exploit your success for their own benefit. Emma and I had developed new family traditions that celebrated our resilience and our commitment to protecting each other. Every month on the anniversary of the day Patricia and Stephanie were sentenced, we donated money to the Children's Legal Defense Fund and wrote thank you notes to the people who had helped us through our crisis. Dr. Foster, thank you for helping me remember that Mommy loves me even when she has to work, Emma wrote in her latest thank you note. Now I help other kids remember that their parents love them too. As Emma's 8th birthday approached, she had one special request for her celebration. Mommy, I want to invite Detective Williams and Mrs. Burton and Dr. Foster and all the people who helped protect us, Emma said as we planned her party. I want them to see how happy and safe I am now because they did such good jobs. Looking at my daughter's bright eyes and confident smile, I marveled at how completely she had recovered from the trauma Patricia and Stephanie had inflicted. More than recovered, she had grown into a child with unusual wisdom, empathy, and strength. Emma, what do you think you learned from everything that happened with Grandma Patricia? I asked her one evening as we worked on her homework together. I learned that some grown-ups lie to get money, but other grown-ups tell the truth to help kids, she replied thoughtfully. And I learned that kids should always tell their mommies and daddies when someone says scary things, even if the scary person says it's a secret. What else did you learn? I learned that working mommies love their kids just as much as non-working mommies, Emma continued, and that when bad things happen, there are always good people who will help fix them. The lessons Emma had learned were profound ones that would serve her throughout her life. She had experienced betrayal and manipulation, but had emerged with a clear understanding of genuine love versus exploitation. She had learned to distinguish between people who wanted to protect her and people who wanted to use her. Most importantly, she had learned that she was worthy of protection, that her voice mattered, and that speaking the truth was always the right choice, even when it was difficult. Mommy, do you think other families will be safer now because of what happened to us? Emma asked as I tucked her into bed. I think so, sweetheart, I replied. Sometimes when bad things happen to good people, it helps everyone learn how to prevent those bad things from happening to other families. Then I'm glad we were brave enough to tell the truth, Emma said with satisfaction. Even though it was scary, it was the right thing to do. As I turned off Emma's bedroom light and watched her drift peacefully to sleep, I reflected on the journey we had taken together. We had faced betrayal, manipulation, and threats to our family bond, but we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. Emma's trust fund was secure, her future was protected, and she had learned invaluable lessons about resilience, truth-telling, and the difference between genuine love and exploitation. The trauma inflicted by Patricia and Stephanie had been transformed into wisdom strength and a commitment to helping other families facing similar challenges. Our story had become one of triumph over betrayal, justice over manipulation, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who had protected each other against all odds. Have you or someone you know ever experienced family members who tried to use false accusations or manipulation to gain access to money or custody? How do you think we can better protect children from family financial exploitation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about families overcoming challenges and finding justice. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing Emma's story of resilience and recovery, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to our journey and for being part of a community that believes children deserve protection from all forms of exploitation. Remember, speaking the truth is always worth it, even when it's scary, because it's how we protect the people we love most. Stay strong, stay brave, and never let anyone convince you that love and money are the same thing.